I left my husband for a spiritual healer who manipulated me, took my savings, and left me stranded in another state while I lost custody of my kids. I threw away my marriage to a fireman for someone who called himself Guru Gary and convinced me that enlightenment required abandoning my family, destroying my TikTok following, and everything I'd built for promises that turned out to be elaborate manipulation. I'm Nicole, 31, was married to Hunter, 33, for 8 years with 2 kids, Lily and Mason. Hunter worked as a firefighter while I'd built a successful TikTok following with lifestyle and family content, making decent money through sponsorships and brand partnerships from our comfortable suburban home. Our life looked perfect on social media, but I felt increasingly hollow creating content about family happiness while feeling disconnected from my actual family. Hunter worked long shifts, and I was constantly performing our life for the camera instead of living it authentically. I started feeling like I was losing myself in the endless cycle of content creation, brand deals, and maintaining an image that felt less and less real every day. I craved something deeper and more meaningful than the superficial world of social media influence. That's when Guru Gary started commenting on my TikToks about spiritual awakening and authentic living. He had thousands of followers and presented himself as an enlightened teacher who helped people find their true purpose beyond material success and social validation. Gary began sending me private messages about how my content showed someone searching for deeper meaning beyond surface-level happiness. He said I had spiritual potential that was being wasted on creating content for a society that valued appearance over enlightenment. Our conversations became increasingly personal as Gary shared insights about consciousness, meditation, and breaking free from societal conditioning. He made me feel like I was special and chosen, someone capable of achieving higher awareness than ordinary people. Gary started suggesting that my family life was holding me back from spiritual growth. He said attachment to conventional relationships prevented true enlightenment and that I was too advanced spiritually to remain trapped in suburban conformity. I began attending Gary's online workshops and meditation sessions, spending hours listening to his teachings about releasing attachments and embracing authentic spiritual living. His philosophy felt profound and meaningful compared to my shallow social media existence. Gary convinced me that my TikTok success was actually spiritual poison, keeping me focused on external validation instead of inner growth. He said true awakening required abandoning the ego-driven pursuit of followers and money for genuine consciousness expansion. Hunter noticed my changing behavior and growing obsession with Gary's teachings, but I dismissed his concerns as jealousy about my spiritual development. Gary had taught me that family members often resist enlightenment because it threatens their control over us. Gary began pressuring me to attend his retreat center in Colorado for intensive spiritual training. He said I was ready for advanced teachings that could only be received in person, away from the distractions and negative energy of my current life. The retreat cost $15,000, which Gary said was an investment in my spiritual future that would pay dividends beyond material wealth. He convinced me that attachment to money was preventing my consciousness from expanding to its full potential. I used money from our savings account to pay for the retreat without telling Hunter, rationalizing that spiritual growth was more important than material security. Gary had taught me that conventional financial planning was fear-based thinking that limited abundance. When Hunter discovered the missing money, I told him about Gary's teachings and my plans to attend the retreat. Hunter was furious and begged me not to go, saying Gary sounded like a manipulative cult leader targeting vulnerable people. I left for Colorado despite Hunter's objections, convinced that he was trying to sabotage my spiritual growth out of fear and ignorance. Gary had prepared me for this resistance, calling it the ego's last attempt to maintain control. At the retreat center, Gary separated attendees from their phones and outside contact, claiming that digital devices created spiritual interference. I couldn't communicate with Hunter or the kids for weeks while undergoing intensive consciousness training. Gary's teachings became increasingly controlling and bizarre. He demanded total obedience, claiming that questioning his methods showed spiritual immaturity. He convinced me that my old life had been an illusion and that true awakening required complete surrender. Gary began requesting additional payments for advanced teachings, claiming that financial sacrifice demonstrated commitment to spiritual growth. I transferred more money from our accounts, believing I was investing in consciousness expansion. The retreat extended indefinitely as Gary claimed I wasn't ready to return to ordinary reality without more training. He said my spiritual progress was exceptional but required continued guidance to prevent backsliding into unconscious living. I discovered that Gary was sleeping with multiple female attendees, calling it spiritual partnership beyond conventional morality. When I questioned this behavior, he said jealousy was ego resistance that proved I needed more enlightenment work. Gary started isolating me from other retreat participants, claiming I was his most advanced student and needed specialized training. He convinced me to sign over power of attorney for my financial accounts, saying attachment to money blocked spiritual growth. Meanwhile, Hunter had filed for divorce and emergency custody of our children after I'd been gone for 3 months without contact. Gary told me this was the universe removing obstacles to my spiritual development. Gary drained our savings and investment accounts, claiming the money was needed for spiritual center expansion. When I finally realized I'd been manipulated, he abandoned me at the retreat center without transportation or resources to return home. I was stranded in Colorado with no money, no phone, and no way to contact anyone for help. The other retreat attendees had dispersed, and Gary had disappeared completely, leaving behind a property that was apparently rented rather than owned, and left me stranded in another state while I lost custody of my kids. I managed to contact Hunter from a local library computer, begging him to help me get home from Colorado. His response was cold and final. He said I'd made my choice when I abandoned our family for a cult leader, and he was done enabling my destructive decisions. Hunter's divorce had been finalized during my absence, with the court granting him full custody of Lily and Mason due to my abandonment and financial irresponsibility. I'd lost my children while chasing enlightenment with someone who'd systematically robbed us. My TikTok account had been inactive for months, causing me to lose brand partnerships and thousands of followers who'd moved on to other creators. The income stream I'd built over years was completely destroyed by my absence. I had to contact my parents for money to get home, enduring their disappointment and lectures about how I destroyed my family for an obvious scammer. They helped reluctantly, too ashamed of my choices to offer ongoing support. Gary had vanished completely after draining multiple victims' accounts. I discovered through online forums that he'd run similar scams on other spiritual seekers, always targeting people with savings and spiritual vulnerability. When I finally returned home, I found that Hunter had sold our house and moved with the kids to a smaller place I didn't know the address of. He blocked me on all social media and changed his phone number. The court-ordered supervised visits with Lily and Mason were heartbreaking. They barely remembered me after months of absence, and they were confused about why Mommy had disappeared and why Daddy seemed sad when my name was mentioned. I had to rebuild my entire life from nothing, moving into a studio apartment and working retail jobs to survive. My TikTok career was over, and potential employers were skeptical of someone with a months-long gap in employment history. Hunter had started dating someone new, a teacher named Sarah who was wonderful with our children. Lily and Mason talked about her during our visits, describing activities and games she played with them while I'd been chasing spiritual fantasies. I tried rebuilding my social media presence, but my followers had moved on, and my content felt hollow after everything I experienced. I couldn't create authentic family content when I destroyed my family for a spiritual con artist. The financial damage was devastating. Gary had drained our savings, retirement accounts, and college funds for the kids. Hunter was working overtime to rebuild what I'd lost, while I struggled to pay rent on minimum wage jobs. My parents gradually reduced contact as the shame of my situation became overwhelming. Having a daughter who'd abandoned her children for a cult leader wasn't something they could easily explain to their social circle. Lily and Mason adapted to life without me faster than I'd expected. Sarah became their stable mother figure while I became the woman who visited them twice a month under supervision, trying to rebuild relationships I destroyed. I joined support groups for cult survivors, but my situation was different from most members who'd been recruited as vulnerable teenagers or adults. I'd been a successful adult with a family who'd chosen manipulation over reality. Dating was impossible while dealing with supervised custody visits and the reputation of someone who'd abandoned their children for a spiritual scammer. Most men weren't interested in my baggage and obvious poor judgment. 2 years later, I'm still working to rebuild some kind of stable life. I work multiple part-time jobs while trying to increase my custody time with kids who barely know me anymore. Hunter married Sarah last year, and they're providing the stable family environment I'd destroyed. They bought a house together and are giving Lily and Mason the security I'd thrown away for empty promises. Gary is probably running the same scam on other vulnerable people, targeting spiritual seekers with savings and family responsibilities he can convince them to abandon. He faces no consequences for the destruction he caused. My TikTok following is gone, my family is broken, and my children have a stepmother who deserves them more than I do. I traded everything real for spiritual promises that were designed to exploit my dissatisfaction. The worst part is knowing that Lily and Mason are genuinely better off with Hunter and Sarah providing daily stability while I remain a visiting stranger who abandoned them for someone who was systematically robbing our family. I had everything I'd ever claimed to want: a loving husband, beautiful children, financial success, and a platform to share our happiness. But I threw it all away for someone who identified my spiritual seeking as a weakness to exploit. Hunter got justice and a partner who would never abandon their family for a spiritual con artist. Sarah gets to be the mother my children needed while I'd been chasing enlightenment. Gary got our life savings and disappeared. The spiritual awakening I'd sought turned out to be the most unconscious decision I'd ever made, destroying everything that mattered for promises that existed only in Gary's manipulation. I lost my family, my career, and my future for absolutely nothing. I threw away 8 years of marriage and 2 beautiful children for someone who saw my spiritual curiosity as an opportunity to steal everything I'd worked for. Now I live alone while my ex-husband builds the family I destroyed with someone who actually deserves them. The retreat that was supposed to transform my consciousness just showed me how easily I could be manipulated when I was searching for meaning beyond material success. My enlightenment was Gary's payday, and my awakening was losing everything that had made my life